Hey, welcome back to the video. It's been some time. So today I am going to tell you how exactly I structure my components in the front-end project, right? To make the code organization better, to make sure the code quality remains intact, to make sure my team understands or the people coming in my team after me understand where exactly what remains, right? Uh, so I have been working and building front-end projects since almost 4 years now, and I have had my fair share of problems. And this particular folder structure or folder organization has nurtured through all that process. So I would not certainly say that this is the perfect organization, but it is certainly something that can get you started. Ideally, you would want to take a front-end organization and make it your own, and yeah, make sure that you tweak it as per your own requirement, as per your team's requirement. Until unless you and your team are on the same page, everything should be good. All right, let's get started without wasting further time. Okay. So here you can see I have already built a Next.js project. So I will simply first thing that we are going to add is a components folder, right? So what is a components folder? A components folder includes all your UI components. So if I speak technically, all your React nodes, right? So for example, I am building a component called, let us just yeah, I am building a component called component A, right? So how would I add it into this particular scenario? I will go inside the components folder. I'll create a folder called component A. Now, why did I create a different folder for component A and not a TSX or JSX directly? So the reason being, because component A might also have other internal dependencies, right? So component A might be depending on other smaller components, maybe component C or component D, right? So if those component, for example, component C is used in component A and it is only used in component A, ideally I would want C to be inside A's folder in order to make for me to make sense, in order to find those things easily, correct? So let me just show it to you, right? I have created a folder for component A, then we go inside. I create a component A.tsx. Now one more thing here to observe is that I named the folders by small letter, right? But the file name and class name which contain the a class or an interface should always be capital. Even React encourages this syntax. Furthermore, it helps you differentiate easily what is a class or interface and what is a variable or something else, right? So that being said, here is a simple component A. Now, what if, now what if it depends on a component C, right? So something like this happens, correct? Now, where should I place component C? That is a question that remains. So if component A only depends on component C, right? Why should I create a different folder for it, right? Ideally, all the stuff that are organized, that are organized together, that are related to each other, that are in one domain should remain in one domain, one folder, as close to each other as possible. So inside component A, I will create a new folder called component C. Okay, this one will have our C component. let us quickly create the particular component. Yep. Okay. And we just simply import it here. Oops. Component. Yep. All right. So basically this is how I would structure my components, right? Now for now, there is a possibility that yeah, you will have, certainly there will be, you will have like 10, 15, even more components in a larger project, right? So let's create one more component here. Right now we have maybe a component B, right? No worries here. And let's create a file for component B as well. Cool. Okay. I'll just quickly copy paste the code and edit it for B. Alright. Now we have a component B. Correct. These components will then be later included in page, yeah, in pages or page components, I would say. Now, for the people who are coming from React background, it won't matter much. But for people coming from Next.js background, might already be exposed to the concept of pages. So what happens is basically you will have it. Yeah, you will have a pages folder, right? And in the pages folder you will have different folders that represent the route that will be present in your URL. So for example, in the pages folder I have a folder called A, right, and a file called A.tsx, correct? Yeah, something like this. So this file will be available at URL slash A slash A, right? So reason being it is inside an A folder and the file name is A. I guess that is simple enough, right? So usually how the flow remains is pages use components and components further use other components. Okay, all right. So that being said, the folders that I make here, this component A, component B, usually I make it in such a way that these two represent one page. Like component A will represent a page, component B will represent all components of page B, that kind of thing. Because the only reason for me to have file A.tsx is that I just want a page file to represent the configuration of a page. So that may include its security policy, that may include its routing and bunch of other stuff, but nothing else, right? All the UI management, I want to organize it in a different place. So that is the reason why we have a different components folder and we have a different pages folder. Anyway, all right. So now you see we have two folders. We have components, we have pages. Inside pages we have different folders for each page. Inside component we have different folder for each component. And plus for the folders that are a dependency only in one component are placed inside, nested inside that folder, right? Now the question remains, what about components that are dependencies in multiple components, right? So for example, there's a component D that is used in both A and B. Let me show it to you. So here you are seeing component A. Now for example, it also uses a component called component D. Yeah. Similarly, even B makes use of the same. Okay. Now where would you place component D? That is a question. Ideally, you would want to put component D here. And why is that, you would ask, right? Now, the reason being, since it is used in both of those, it should be outside of both of those. That is the logic that we are using. Because if I write it in simple English, if a component is a dependency, yeah, a component's location should be a sibling to its dependencies, a sibling or a parent to its dependencies, right? So this right here is very important, correct? Because this clearly tells me that component D might be when I see the structure, I know that component D might be being used in component B and A, right? So that is a simple reason that we are putting component D here. Yeah, that's one more thing, that if you are sure that component D will not have further any more dependency, like no component D inside won't use any other component. It is a full-fledged solo component in itself. So you don't really have to create a folder. Just remove it and replace it with your simple TSX file. Yeah, because there's no point in adding pointless complexity to the project. All right, now here we have a component D. Let us just import it quickly. Okay, good. All right, so that being said, we understood how are components kept inside the component folder, how are their dependencies kept inside the components folder. Now what about components that are used in a lot of files, right? And you are not sure exactly yeah, in what files you will be using them. So let me give you an example. For example, you have a styled button, right? A styled button that is something that you will be using across your project. So now it brings the question of where exactly to put it, because you need to find it very quickly and very easily. Now to do that, what I usually do is inside the components folder, I create a new folder called utilities. Now people usually create the utilities folder outside. Yeah, let's create it outside. Okay, that is easier for everybody to understand. So now, okay, so now we have a utilities folder, right? A utilities folder will have same stuff as the components, but it will be specifically for the components that do not have any further dependency inside one. And second, most importantly, the components that are going to be used across the project at any huge frequency, right? So those components are usually kept inside utilities folder because as the name says, they are a utility, right? So let us just put a dummy component here. Okay. Okay. Yeah. The whole folder structure is just same. There is no difference honestly. So it is just for organization purposes and the ease of finding stuff. I guess that is all why we are doing it. Okay. All right. Now I told you what components are, how are components kept, how are their dependencies kept, how are pages, what are pages and where they are kept, what are utilities and where they are kept. Right. Now a few other simple stuff are also there that you need to create specific folders for. So for example, they might have assets, right? So folder for assets. You might have configuration files, so folder for config. Yep. And one more thing, for example, not for example, you will have in any React, Node.js, Next.js project, you will have a lot of components, right? So similarly, you will have a lot of utilities in the project. Ideally, you won't want to have 10 different imports in one file, right? So to save yourself from that, what we do is we introduced like loose coupling into the picture. Now let me explain to you what loose coupling is. So inside the components folder, what I do is I create a file called ComponentA.tsx. Now here create a simple variable called components, and I import all different components that we had created. So there's a component A and there's a component B. Yeah, we just keep them here and we return the components. Now, for example, one more thing that we might need. Okay, this seems good enough. Yeah. Okay. Similarly, we will create one for utilities. Utilities.tsx. Okay. And here we'll import component E because that is an utility, and just simply export utilities. So this is very straightforward. Now, for example, I need to use this utility, your component E, inside component D. So what would I do? I would just go in component D. I would import utilities. Yeah. And simply do this. So this is how you basically import utilities. Now, for example, we had two more utilities, right? Let us create two more utilities. There's a utility called F for F. Honestly, let's have one utility. I think you are smart enough to understand what I want to say, right? So we will just import component F. Okay, yeah, 1 second. Yeah, component F, component F. Okay, we import the component F. Cool, right? So now if you see, if I want to use component F as well here, I don't really have to import it again. I already have utilities in place. All I need to do is do this and we are golden. Yeah. So that is how we introduce, I would say, a loose coupling into the picture. Now, how I say it is a loose coupling. So for example, I tomorrow want to replace all component F's with component D. So I won't go around changing it in every file the name of component F. What I will do is I go to utilities and simply do here. Yep. And yeah, we are good to go. Right. So what it does, it introduces loose coupling into the picture where I can particularly replace a component with whatever else I want in the near future. Okay. So that's that. And yeah, I guess that is all we have. You will need a few more folders depending on how complex your project is. You might need a services folder. Uh, you might need a Redux folder for all your Redux communications, which will include your store and providers. And in Redux folder, you might have a folder for slices and a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, there will be a store.ts, provider.ts, I guess, provider.tsx. But yeah, you get the gist of it and summary of it. Basically, what we do. Make sure you nest familiar stuff together. Make sure that each file that is a dependency is always a parent or a sibling to the components it is dependency of. That means it is always above its dependents, right? And third thing, ensure you have applied loose coupling. Do not keep your code tightly coupled. It will become a real big pain as you go ahead building bigger, more complex and complicated projects. So yeah, that's all for this time. Good to see you. Subscribe me on Medium, subscribe me on YouTube and all the good stuff. See you later. Bye.